When a car manufacturer resurrects the name from the past, and it's from a car that was very, very good, it's a very fine balancing act, because the memories of that old car are such that the new one can't disappoint in any way. Now, Renault have done it with great effect with the new Renault 5 and, of course, the new Renault 4 E-Tech. Brilliant cars in the past attached to brilliant cars from the present. Ford, on the other hand, well, they've got a bit of a problem, haven't they? Because, of course, they've launched the Capri, which is a great name from the past on a very mediocre car. But what happens if you go the other way? You use a name from a car from the past that was, well, a bit rubbish, and you apply it to your new model. Well, as Yaz once said, surely the only way is up. Well, let's hope so for Vauxhall's sake, because this is the new Vauxhall Frontera. Welcome to this week's road test review. Welcome to the new Vauxhall Frontera. Please sit yourself down, make yourself comfortable in the house of cars. Now, I stand by that opening statement about the old Vauxhall Frontera being a bit of a rubbish car because I say it with some authority. I sold Vauxhalls back in 1995 when the Frontera was around, and it was terrible as far as I was concerned. It was so terrible, in fact, that I actually refused to sell one to a friend of mine. Don't get me wrong, they looked good, and they did an awful lot with the Suzuki Vitara to sort of like help the plight of the SUV. Hot hatchbacks were getting stolen all the time back in sort of like the early 1990s, and insurance costs were going up. So of course the international bright young things wanted something to replace their GTIs, and so they turned their attention to SUVs, and there was the Frontera with its butch looks and sort of lifestyle orientated styling that helped pave the way for the SUV onslaught that we have now. And of course this new Frontera is also an SUV, but it's a very different one to that first car. And if you're thinking that it looks very, very familiar to a car that I've road tested in recently, then you'll know that it also bears a striking resemblance to the Citroen C3 Aircross, because the two cars are obviously underneath the Stellantis umbrella, their group of brands. And whilst badge engineering is quite common throughout the car industry, Stellantis have managed to keep their models looking quite dissimilar across the different brands, except for the C3 Aircross and the Frontera. But don't think of it just as a rebadged Citroen, as you'll see as we go through this road test review. Now, it effectively replaces the Crossland in Vauxhall's lineup, so it sits somewhere between the Mokka and the Grandland. Vauxhall say it's a sort of interesting, because Citroen say that the C3 Aircross is their B SUV, Vauxhall see this as a C SUV, so it sits somewhere at the very top of the B segment, sort of like, the smaller style of SUVs, and just into sort of like the C segment cars, so the family sort of like style cars, such as Qashqai, Kia Sportage and things like that. So it's somewhere straddles those two markets, depending obviously on the thing. But the question is, it's got the Frontera badge, so how does it drive? Well, let's take a look at it through another House of Cars road test review and find out. But as always, before we start the main review, let's take a look at the main points on the car. Well, the new Vauxhall Frontera is the company's entrant into the compact B, almost into C segment SUV market, and will offer customers the choice of either petrol hybrids or fully electric models, with seating for up to 7, depending on model chosen. Like the C3 Aircross from Citroen, it's built on Stellantis' new Smart Car platform. The hybrid model offers a 1.2 litre 3-cylinder turbocharged petrol engine mated to a small electric motor that produces up to 136 horsepower, depending on model. And prices start at just $23,995, with the electric models actually being cheaper option of the two drivelines offered. So like its counterpart from Citroen, the new Frontera seems to offer a lot of choice when it comes to drivetrain, a lot of choice when it comes to interior configuration, and a lot of value for money when it comes to the price of the car. So why would you choose the Vauxhall over its French cousin? Well, let's put it through a House of Cars road test review and find out. Now, I'm trying to be a bit clever with this review, because if you watch this on House of Cars, I'll review the hybrid model, and if you watch it on Auto EV, I'm reviewing the electric model. But I am using the same car in some respects other than the driving impressions, because obviously styling wise there's no difference between the battery electric models and of course the hybrid ones. So Welcome to House of Cars and welcome to Auto EV. So the styling of it, it doesn't look like the Citroen. As I say, it's not the Citroen with the Vauxhall badge on it. They really have changed it. And of course, it uses the visor graphic that we're used to seeing on Vauxhalls that we started seeing with the Mokka. Gosh, back in 2021, the Mokka came out. Good little car, the Mokka. That's its proper like B segment car. This sits above it, and then of course above this you've got the bigger Grandland. And of course it shares the same design, but it doesn't look just like a bigger Mokka. It doesn't look like an extended Mokka or a shrunken Grandland. You know, that still has its own sort of style. But of course, as I say, you've got your visor graphic across the front here with your blackened out Griffin badge. Vauxhall talk about the compass design in a lot of their cars, and there's an element of that there, and I thought that was going to see it, but there's no ridge up the bonnet, so there isn't really the compass signature at the front of the car that you get on some of them. Of course, you get your LED DRLs down there, and of course LED headlights depending on model. Now there's 3 trim levels. You either go for the design, which is the lead-in car, the GS or the Ultimate. This is a mid-spec GS car that we've got here, and if you go for GS or Ultimate, then what you get is you get this two-tone paint finish, you know, with the black roof. However, if you do go for the design model, the lead-in car, you can have it because it comes with steel wheels, the design model, which look brilliant, but you can add a two-tone white roof and white wheels as part of what they call the design package for £400. Well worth it if you're going for that design model, in my opinion. It does sit slightly high off the ground because I say obviously it's that sort of compact SUV sort of style, and of course you've got the cooling that's down at the bottom there, and of course there's more cooling in there, and then again a mid-spec GS and then Ultimate models get this sort of grey finish for the sort of like skid plate, if you like, at the front there, but the design models will have that in black. But it's a handsome looking car, maybe not quite as good looking as the Citroen, if I'm being blunt about it. I much prefer the sort of the more quirky design of the Citroen over the Vauxhall, but if that's not your bag, then at least then, as I say, if you prefer to have something a little bit more sedatory, dare I suggest, when it comes to the styling, then you're certainly not going to be offended by this at all. This is a decent looking little crossover, isn't it? Now, I talked about the category of car that it is earlier, and of course that's what sort of Vauxhall have mentioned. They see it as being, the Mokka has been their B segment. They say this is the lower C segment, the Grandland is the upper C segment. It's 4.3 metres long, okay, so that gives you an idea of the length of the car. So it's one of the longer cars if you look at it as the upper B segment in that sense. And if you go for the GS or Ultimate models in hybrid, you can't get it in an electric car, you do have the option of a 7-seat. As well, which is quite unique in this class, in fairness. So that's quite good. But it's shorter than a Nissan Qashqai, which is sort of like the traditional C-segment SUV crossover that we all think about. So it's shorter than that car, okay? And as I say, I find it quite interesting. Citroen see their car as a B-segment SUV. Anyway, there we go. That's the size of the car. Again, it'll depend obviously on the model you go for as to what you get. As I say, design models get the 16-inch steel wheels. They'll be black in finish unless you go for that design pack where they end up being white, which is quite cool. I quite like that. And then if you go up to the GS and the Ultimate, then you move up to 17-inch alloy wheels. Okay, remember the Citroen's just available in the 2 trim levels to get alloys as standard. GS and Ultimate, as I say, you get this two-tone finish as standard. Of course, you get the black roof with the contrasting body colour. You get some nice sort of plastic sort of like cladding down the side there along the sills, which help protect the side of the car as well. And of course, your usual obligatory wheel arch extensions in the plastic. Plus, you get roof rails on the higher trim levels as well. But yeah, it's not exactly going to set your hair on fire, is it? And it doesn't quite have the same sort of style, I think, of the little Mokka. And I'm not quite sure it's quite as slick looking as the Grandland. But it's not bad. And the rear of it's quite neat looking as well, isn't it? You know, again, it's not going to offend Andy, is it? Of course, you get a big roof spoiler there. Rear wash wipe, which is going to be handy on a day like today when it's just about to start chucking it down and I'm going to get wet. You get your rear LED lights as you'd expect there. Of course, your blackened out Griffin badge, Frontera spelled. So rather than Vauxhall across the back, you get the actual model designation spelled out across the back for you. You do have a reversing camera up in there, again on GS and Ultimate models. And then you got the black plastic sort of like bumper area, but again with this sort of like light silver, sort of like skid plate design at the rear of the car. A couple of little reflectors either side. That's about it. Look, as I say, it's hardly the most exciting looking car that Vauxhall have ever produced, is it? And dare I suggest, the first Frontera I always thought was quite a decent looking car. It's just a shame that it was so bloody rubbish. This one might be a bit different though. But is it just a little bit too bland for your tastes? Whatever your thoughts are on it, please let me know. Right, time to get the umbrella out, I think. Well, look, it's October in the UK, so what did we expect? Right, so practicality of the car. Well, it's not bad actually, in fairness. 460 litres of boot space if you go for this 5-seat model. But if you go for a 7-seat option, which is a £550 option on the hybrid and GS and Ultimate trims, then that will drop the boot capacity from that 460 litres down to 370 litres. 5-seat model, if you drop down the 60/40 rear bench, it'll take total capacity up to 1,600 litres. I think it's just over 1,400 litres if you have the 7-seat option as well. The other thing is, if you go for the hybrid, you have the ability to tow with them as well. 1,250 kilos of a brake trailer if you tow with the 5-seat model, and I think it's 1,050 kilos on a brake trailer with the 7-seat car, okay? There's no towing ability on the electric model. The boot space itself is nice. It's a nice, easy sort of like access into the boot. With the boot floor in its highest position like it is now on this 5-seat model, you've got a nice flat load entry in. However, I don't have my suitcases with me because I'm on the UK launch, which would be weird if I turned up with suitcases, but if I put my camera bags down there, you can see you get some storage in there and a variable height boot floor, so you can drop it down to give it a bit extra height, but then bear in mind you do have a little bit of a drop then into the rear boot of the car. But otherwise, there's not really an awful lot to complain about practicality wise here. Vauxhall say what you're getting with the Frontera is the sort of like the same practicality of an Astra Estate in the same size of car as an Astra hatchback. So if you need the practicality but not the size, then maybe the Frontera could well be your car. The only thing I would say is if you do go for the 7-seat option, leave your suitcases behind, would you? Because yeah, there's no space for them. Lots of space for people, not so much for the luggage. What you do get is a huge amount of interior space in the back of the car as well. The only thing is your feet do feel a little bit pushed up, that's the only thing. But certainly as far as legroom and headroom is concerned, this is a really big car. It certainly doesn't look it from the outside, but when you get inside, this is what you're faced with. So it's decent size for a family, I would suggest. There's plenty of knee room here. Now that seat's set up for myself, and I'm 5'8", so that's the sort of driving position I would have. So even if I was taller at 6 foot or something, with that slid slightly further back, you're still going to have enough legroom. You just feel, as I say, your feet are a bit pushed up, that's all, because as I say, this is a sort of multi-energy platform that it sits on, the smart car platform, which effectively is an adaptation of the Stellantis group. What is it called again? The CM2, I think, CM2 EV platform or something like that. So basically it's been designed as an electric car first, so there's less compromise to be made with converting a combustion engine platform to EV. So you've got almost a flat floor across. So if you're going in for the hybrid model as well, you get a good amount of floor space, you know, for 3 people across. But of course you get all the benefits there, but the downside is your feet feel a bit pushed up. But there's bags of headroom. I mean, I could genuinely wear a big hat in here and I'd be fine. Storage is good as well. You know, you've got the mat pockets on the backs of the seats here. You've also got these 2 little pockets up here where you can drop phones into as well. So that's quite nice and handy on the back of both of these seats. Again, moving up in spec from design to GS and Ultimate, you get 2 rear USB ports. So if you've got the 2 kids and they both need to charge their devices, that's not a problem. Plus there's also a 12-volt socket down there. The only downside is there's no centre armrest with cup holders, but there is a door bin there, which should take a water bottle, he says. Can I get my... Excuse the view you've just had there, folks. But yeah, I can pop the a water bottle just down in there if it's a slightly thinner one than my Yeti one. So in terms of practicality, it's decent enough for a family car. Obviously, in the name of consumerism, I'm going to have to try and get in the back of this car, haven't I? Right, so you flip that down, pull that, and it tumbles forward. Actually, quite a decent way of getting sort of like the seats to tip forward. But getting in here is one thing. Being comfortable in it is quite another. Yeah, kids only, not fat blokes in their 50s. Now, if there's a difference on the outside to the Citroen C3 Aircross, there's a big difference on the inside as well. Maybe not such a good difference in some respects. There's no doubt about it that the Citroens have got a far more interesting looking interior, and just a nicer interior in some respects. Now, don't get me wrong, this is a very usable interior, it's a very practical interior, it's a very sensible interior, but yeah, it's sensible, you know what I mean. Like the Citroen, it starts with, oh, he says, a key, which is rather nice. So you pop your key in and you turn it around, and that will start your car up. And you're greeted with Vauxhall's what they call Pure Panel, which is two 10-inch displays, one for the driver and then obviously one for your infotainment screen across here. Now, it does look a little bit less dramatic looking than the Citroen, and obviously, you know, some of the other Stellantis products, such as the Peugeot E2008 and cars such as that. But that's not to say that it's not a, you know, a good system that's in the car here. You get standard Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which is wireless. You get standard climate control as well. Oh, hello. Yeah. You get standard climate control as well, which is a digital climate control on GS and Ultimate, standard twirly physical knobs on the design model, which is what I do quite like about it. Let me just pop my water bottle down here. So you get these lovely sort of like climate control systems across here. So you get your heated seat. It's exactly the same panel we had in the C3. So heated seats either side, a heated windscreen, heated steering wheel on this model. And then you get physical controls for the temperature, direction, recirculation, and then fan speed there. And then of course you've got your auto climate, your full defrost, aircon, and your heated rear screen across there. Physical controls for hazards and locking. The other nice thing as well, you also get the physical controls to turn off the ADAS systems, and they're down by your right knee here. So press and hold the button down here, I think it's for 5 seconds, and it turns off the speed limit warning. Yep, it's now flashing. And then just, I think it's a slightly longer press and hold to deactivate. Yep, there you go. I think it's 3 seconds and it turns off the lane keep assist. That's it. So that's really good. I like that. I like the fact Stellantis have really taken notice of stuff like that. But yeah, it just looks a little bit bland, doesn't it? You know, in terms of the, you know, as opposed to the Citroen model. There's a couple of really nice little touches. You know, you get this, it seems like a weird thing to talk about, but this ledge here means you can sort of like rest your fingers on it as you're using the touch screen. You know, you're not jabbing at it just in midair. That's quite nice. I mean, obviously you can do that with your thumb, but you know what I mean? That's quite well thought. There's no buttons there. Yeah, it's just a resting panel for your, you know, your fingers to use the screen. And then of course you get your icons down this side here. So your home screen there. What I do like, and again, sorry, it sounds a bit repetitive if you've watched the other reviews, but I like the more basic nature of the Stellantis infotainment system now. I really do. It's a really nice simple thing to use. So as you see, you just load up your CarPlay and that's it. Or there's inbuilt navigation there, and you can go into settings menu there. But you see what I mean? There's not loads and loads and loads of tiles, is there? You know, you just go in there for general stuff, setting up languages. You don't need to do that. You know, your display brightness, that's it. Pairing up your devices, that's very simple. I did it within seconds this morning, and your audio one there, that's it. And then there's an icon there for your inbuilt navigation. Otherwise you're just using CarPlay. I really like the simple nature of it. I really do. I think it works really, really well, and it's just enough. You know, there's no head-up display. As I say, Citroen call theirs a head-up display because they take the instrument panel and put it right at the base of the windscreen. The Vauxhall's a more conventional looking dashboard, so you're looking down into the binnacle there. And it's not the most interesting looking, however, it's very clear. That's the nice thing about it. You know, the font that they use isn't that sort of old Casio calculator style that Citroen use. It's a very clear font, so everything's very easy to read at a glance, but it's not up here, it's down here. So just where you'd expect to find it. There's just a lot of plastic around. That's my only downside. You know, this silver sort of plastic. Well built, don't get me wrong, but it's just a lot of plastic. You know what I mean? That's it. The Citroen had a nice sort of fabric interior, and that's what I really liked about it. Same on the top there, a really hard, you know, black plastic. On the doors, hard black and silver plastic, you know. There is some nice cloth covered armrests, however, and I'm going to talk about the seats in a minute or two as well. Practicality. Not bad. You get this nice little ledge in front of the passenger that's got a rubber mat, which is a really good idea. And you can drop, you know, I've got the, what is it, an iPhone Pro Max thing, so that's the biggest one. That sits in there, so that's quite nice. If your passenger's dropping the mobile in there, that's nice and easy. As I say, you've got a wireless charging pad there, I think on GS and Ultimate, so that's nice and handy. You've got these elasticated straps here. Now, at first I thought, well, that's a really good idea, depending on the size of your coffee cup or water bottle, but actually, it doesn't really work that well in practice, and I think they'll end up becoming quite loose. Now, of course, I carry around a big Yeti, but the downside there, of course, is it then hits the the climate control systems. Maybe the cup holders being back here would have been slightly better, but I'm not going to knock them for trying to be innovative, you know, with that type of thing there. You get your usual gear selector here that you would expect. So of course, park, reverse, neutral, drive, and then C. We'll talk about that when we're driving it. Electric park brake there, a little cubby box in there just for, you know, I don't know, packet of Polar-Mints or something like that. You get this extendable armrest, however, that I do like, you know, because that's quite nice when you're driving along. You've got slightly sort of like different, you know, you can move that around. Plus as well, you can open that up, and it's, although it's quite narrow, it is very deep. The cubby that's in there, so there's a nice amount of storage in there. There's a huge amount of storage around the cabin in terms of literage if you actually take it onto account. Plus you get good big door bins, which are like the back ones. They will take my big Yeti flask as well, so they go down in there quite nicely. You still get the half glove box because obviously it's a Stellantis car, which is a bit of a joke, I think. And then you get this sort of like new sort of steering wheel, which is actually quite nice. I quite like this, and I like the design of it. So you get the nice 3-spoke sort of design. You get the big buttons either side, and they look touch sensitive. They're not. They are physical buttons, but it's one button that does a multitude of, you know, tasks. Same as the Citroen, it's no different. So you just need to make sure you know that the what corner you're pressing to make it actually work, the actual function you want it to work. But they're nice and easy to use. Quite like them, and as I say, the fact they're physical buttons is always good. And then you get the nice column stocks that we've seen from things like, you know, the rest of the Stellantis group, this new style of sort of like almost squared off column stocks, which feel nice and chunky and solid when you do activate them. So it's all good from that point of view. The design lacks flair for me, and there's just a lot of plastic around. That's the only two real downsides that I've got. The Citroen C3 Aircross is a much more interesting interior. It's very functional, this. It all does the same job. It all works very well, and it's very clear. I just wish there was a bit more flair involved in it. Right, the last thing I do want to talk about, however, is the seats, okay? Now, Citroen, if you've watched my review on the EC3 Aircross, you'll know that Citroen have this thing, their Advanced Comfort Programme, which involves the suspension and the seats. Vauxhall have what they call Intelli seats. Silly name, but actually works really, really well. Down the centre of them is like a sort of valley on the sort of like the squab itself, and this is something they got in some, I think, German university or medical people involved in all of this, and it's to do with your spinal column, where your tailbone is effectively, and where this valley runs down sort of like the squab of the seat at the very, very back of it. It means that it's not pushing against that tailbone, so you don't get discomfort, and it holds you really, really well on your buttocks, which is really nice. And actually, I have to say, the support down the side of your legs, and actually, although they look quite flat, they're not. There's a good bit of bolstering going on down the side there, and for lateral support. So I have to say, whilst they're not quite as cushiony and lovely and spongy as the Citroens, they are a really comfortable seat to sit in. I don't think you'd have any problems doing a long distance in this car at all, because I think this is a really comfortable seat to sit in, and I think that's a real sort of like plus point, I think, for the Vauxhall. We saw it in the Grandland. It's now here on the Frontera, and I think it's a real winner for me. So the driving position's really nice, the wheel's nice, the seats are really comfortable, and as I say, it's very, very functional, but it just lacks any flair, and I just feel there's just an awful lot of plastic that you're faced with. So it's a bit like the outside. It works as a car, it's just not the most exciting. The same in here. It works as an interior, it just could do with just a little bit more of a spark for me. Now, when it comes to the technical side of the car, if you go for the hybrid, you get a choice of 2 power ratings. Both are exactly the same engine in terms of what they offer. It's still the 1.2 3-cylinder turbocharged unit with a mild hybrid assistance with a small electric motor that drives the front wheels only. There's no all-wheel drive version of this. And you get a choice of either 110 PS or 145 PS like I've got here. And that will send drive to the front wheels, as I say, through a 6-speed DCT transmission. Now, interestingly, both cars achieve very, very similar when it comes to sort of like fuel economy, because Vauxhall say that you should get round about a combined MPG of about 54 miles to the gallon. Now, I've driven the electric Frontera, and the one thing I'd say about the electric one, the problem seems to lie with it is, and it's the same with the Citroen EC3 Aircross, in fairness, they're not quite as powerful as you'd maybe want them to be. You know, 112 horsepower, 0 to 60 in 12 seconds. It's a bit down. This is the 1.2 litre turbocharged petrol hybrid. So this is 145 PS. So, you know, 130 something horsepower. I tell you what, this is the same this is the same sort of like drive line, if you like, the hybrid drive line that I had in the Jeep Avenger 4xe. Obviously not with four-wheel drive, you know, but the same engine and hybrid system. And it does make a big difference, I think, in the Frontera. Now, bearing in mind this can seat up to 7 people, this particular car. So, you know, anything just over 100 horsepower to me isn't really going to work that well when it comes to sort of like moving your family and luggage around. You know, let's be fair, I'm not needing it to be fast, but I need it to have enough performance that it's, you know, it's going to pull out of a junction without me thinking, oh crikey, that lorry's coming on me quite quickly. And you do get that with this. You know, it's take up right from get-go is quite sprightly, I would suggest. Now, okay, it's just me that's in the car now, but even so, I'd say this is, you know, it gets off the line quite quickly, and I do like that about it. It is nice. So it's got decent acceleration, it's got decent sort of performance. It's a 6-speed DCT transmission that comes in the car, which is quite nice. The one thing I would say about the electric car, though, is the steering just seemed a little bit better. The steering's a bit weightier in the electric car. You know, maybe there's more weight up at the front, that's maybe why. This just feels a little bit light for my liking, if I'm being absolutely critical about it. It could do with just a bit more weight in the steering. That's all I would say about that. But as I say, I do quite like the performance. The ride quality is very good, you know, in terms of the actual, you know, comfort of the car. You know, round about sort of like these roads that we're round today, down in sort of like Wiltshire area, it's, you know, they're very, very nice. You know, it's good ride quality you get from the car. And as I say, having driven the Citroen last week, you know, where I thought that was really excellent, you know, that's a really nice riding little car. Vauxhall have done very, very well, and considering it doesn't use the same suspension system as the Citroen, even so, this is still a very comfortable. As a family car, this hits the right balance for me, you know, in terms of its ride quality and its comfort. I really do like this. So we've got good performance, we've got good ride quality, steering could be slightly better, if I'm being blunt about it. What else have we got? Well, we've got the brakes. Now, that's always been a real bone of contention with me with the Stellantis group of cars. I've always felt that the brakes had this sort of sponginess to them. You know, it was almost like you were standing on a damp sponge. You know, just going down on the pedal, it just felt like there was a lot to go through before the actual brakes actually bit. That's not the case anymore. So we're coming up to these lights, a car behind me. It's a nice progressive brake pedal. I really like that. That just stops the car really well, and it makes for nice, smooth, sort of easy sort of like transition. The only downside is when you then set off again, the accelerator pedal's got quite a sort of like sharpness to it. Now, it wasn't there in the electric car because you really need to stand on the throttle in the electric car to make it go, whereas in the hybrid, although it starts off with electric assistance, you don't get that with it. It just seems to be quite immediate, the power delivery to the road. So all in all, I think it's a really nice little car. I really do. I think they've done really, really well with this. I think it, you know, as I say, it has nice, you know, acceleration. You know, it's good. It feels quick. It feels quick. The ride comfort is exceptionally good. I think the ride quality is, you know, one of the best I've ever had from Vauxhall, I have to say. And they've not been renowned for bad ride quality, but this is a nice riding little car. And as I say, the brakes are a lot better. The only real downside for me is that suspension. It would, is the steering. It would just be nice if it had just a little bit more feel on the steering. That would be really, really nice. Otherwise, there's very, very little to fault here, really. Out on the open road, the car gets up to a reasonable speed as well, you know, quite quickly, which is quite nice. So you do get up to sort of like a speed relatively fast with the car. What I will say in defence of the steering, in terms of it being a little bit lighter, is it does make the car very manoeuvrable. So, you know, you're round about town, you know, you're trying to park, you're just trying to get, you know, through some slightly narrower streets or whatever. It does make the car very manoeuvrable round about town and very, very easy to place. So that's the upside. You know, if you're, I don't know, trying to park in, you know, the multi-storey car park at the supermarket, or you're trying to park between two badly parked large SUVs at the railway station, it seems to be the case in a lot of places these days. What you do have is a very manoeuvrable little car and very easy. Well, I say little, it's not that little. You know, as I say, I keep judging it based upon Citroën telling me it's a B segment SUV. Now Vauxhall are saying, no, 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 it's a C segment SUV, Brian. That's what it is. Anyway, irrespective of what segment it's in, it's actually a very, very manoeuvrable little car and a very good little car. Power delivery's fed in well. It's got a nice progressive power delivery. It goes from hybrid assistance to combustion engine really smoothly, but that was something I noted with the Jeep Avenger. Did, you know, pretty much the same thing. It's got a nice transition between the two. One of the main competitors for this car is going to be something like the Dacia Jogger, which is obviously their sort of 7-seat SUV slash estate slash weird big thing, whatever it is. And the Renault hybrid system, as much as I like Renault, I like their electric stuff, their hybrid system is not as smooth as this. So this is where I would suggest that the Frontera does it slightly better. It's got a slightly smoother transition between going from the hybrid, the electric motor, into the combustion engine. It doesn't feel like it's sort of like, you know, screaming away, sort of like underneath. There's just a really nice transition between the two. So I do like that about it. That is nice. As I say, it's a really easy car to get on with. It's a really easy car to live with. And ultimately, if you've got, you know, you're just looking for a practical family car, you don't want anything that's going to be, you know, that's going to set your world on fire. You don't need anything that's going to be too difficult to sort of like get on with. You just need it to do a job of, or the job of being a car. There's a lot to like here. The only downside for me is I'd like to have seen a bit more flair about it. Just all seems a little bit unimaginative and a little bit unexciting. But as a car, it's very hard to fault it as being just a car. Right, you're going to want to know how much this costs now, okay? So if you opt for the hybrids, I'm going to give you the top and tail of the range and go through all the different options that are available to you. So remember, you have 3 trim levels available to you: Design, GS and Ultimate, okay, with the 2 different sort of like hybrid power ratings, depending obviously which one you go for. So you're going to start at 24,855 for the Design with the 110 PS hybrid unit. So it's actually more expensive than the electric one, because the electric one, when you apply the grant, is 22.5 grand. Good value for money, that car. And then, of course, if you go for the range-topping Ultimate with 145 PS unit, it's 29,565. So you've got quite a lot of scope between those 2 parameters, because obviously 2 different drivetrain power options, plus 3 different trim levels, plus options within those as well. Plus, at the time of filming, Vauxhall are doing a 4-year 0% interest, 0% interest deal on the terms of the financing as well. So Vauxhall are getting back. They know that they're in the consumer car market. They know who their customers are. So they're offering quite a lot to those customers. But as I say, it's a good value for money package overall, without that 0% interest that's available at the moment. But with it, it does make it a little bit better, doesn't it? Right, it's raining now. I need to go and do something else. Now, in terms of competition for the car, well, it's a bit strange because of the size of it. As I say, Vauxhall see it as being a smaller C segment car, maybe a larger B segment car. In terms of its price, it's certainly more in line with B segment cars in some respects. So competition, what are you going to be looking at? Well, of course, I think the main competitor you're going to consider against the Frontera is, of course, from Citroën with the C3 Aircross, because essentially they are the same car offering the same variations upon the same type of theme. But you might also see other cars from within the Stellantis group, you know, providing competition for this, such as the Peugeot 2008, the Fiat 600, the Jeep Avenger, even though none of those offer the 7-seat option that you can get with Frontera or the Citroen. Which brings me on to what I think is going to be the main competition for the car, which is the Dacia Jogger, which I think is a brilliant all-round family car. A car that I tested on the channel about 18 months or so ago now, and a fabulous piece of kit. You know, seating for up to 7, great value for money, and again, a little bit like the Frontera. It's just that basic get on with the job style of car. But in terms of where Vauxhall see it positioned, of course, you could look at other options, you know, which could be as diverse as something like the Ford Puma, all the way to sort of, you know, the base models, sort of like maybe Nissan Qashqais, Toyota CHRs, or that style of car. In terms of its price, it's priced very, very aggressively. In terms of its size, it does offer a huge amount. So if it's a family car you're looking for, there's plenty of options, dare I suggest. The interesting thing with this job is we get to drive all sorts of cars. And there's all sorts of claims made by manufacturers about, you know, luxury, prestige, efficiency, sustainability, all that type of thing. And sometimes you think, have they just forgotten to make a car? Because ultimately some people are just looking for a car to do a job. They're looking for a car to transport their family, their kids, their grandparents, their parents, their dogs, whatever it is around, and do it in a relatively unassuming and efficient type of way. Thankfully, Vauxhall haven't forgot about that, because that's exactly what the new Frontera does. It just gets on with being a car, but it does it really, really well. There's an awful lot to like about it. If I'm being honest with you, I personally would prefer the Citroen C3 Aircross because I think it looks a bit more interesting and I prefer the interior of it. But ultimately, if you're not really bothered about that, and maybe you've got a relationship with your Vauxhall dealer because you've been a customer of theirs for a while, or you don't really like the look of the C3, then there's an awful lot to recommend about the Frontera, because as I say, it just gets on with being, well, a car. And after all, isn't that what you want? At last, the Frontera badge is attached to a good car. Who knew? Thank you for watching another road test review on House of Cars. As always, please make sure you are subscribed to the channel if you'd be so kind, and make sure you've turned on your notifications so that when the next review is uploaded and it goes live, you don't miss it. If you've enjoyed this week's review, and obviously I hope you have, make sure you give it a little thumbs up, and as always, don't forget, leave me your thoughts in the comment section down below. What do you think of the new Vauxhall Frontera? Would you have this over the Citroen C3 Aircross or a Dacia Jogger? Let me know your thoughts. Have you ordered one? Are you going down to your local Vauxhall dealer to have a try on one? Let me know what you think when you've driven it. What did you think of the old one? Do you think it's as rubbish as I do? Anyway, there we go. What else can I say? Oh yes, if you're a fan of social media, you can find me on Instagram, and it's at House of Cars 1973. And remember, whether or not it is a new car or an old car, a large car or a small car, a slow car or a fast car, you'll find them all here in the House of Cars. Thank you again for watching. Thank you for your continued support. I'll see you again soon.